Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this professional learning opportunity. Meet the high demand for social and emotional programming in Catholic schools by maximizing access to federal education programs with Jennifer Daniels and Julie Emery Johnson. I am Beth Rosinski, the Marketing Campaign Manager at NCEA, and I will be facilitating this webinar today. I want to go over just a few housekeeping notes as people are joining. Number one, we will be recording this session today. And number two, at the end of this session, I will share a link to the online survey in the chat with instructions on how to receive a certificate of completion for the webinar. To introduce our host today, Julie has been an educator in both public and private school settings for over 20 years. She has been a teacher, interventionist, instructional coach, curriculum and staff development director, Catholic school superintendent, and consultant. In addition, she has been a strong advocate for education access. She believes all children deserve well-prepared and joy-filled teachers who will invest in finding every student's gifts and talents. The ethics of care and the study of belonging are current research interests for Julie. She's a senior partnership consultant for Friendzy, growing business and developing partnerships in schools across the country. Julie lives in Birmingham, Alabama with her husband, 2 sons, and their beloved pets. They love to travel. Jennifer Daniels has 15 years of Catholic education policy and advocacy experience with both the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and the Archdiocese of Washington. In 2024, Jennifer launched the Faithful Citizenship Institute, blending 2 decades of public policy expertise with her passion for church teaching. FCI inspires Catholic policymakers to prioritize faith over politics, providing impactful programming, tools, and resources that disseminate the inherent beauty and wisdom of Catholic school social teaching to leaders nationwide. Thank you both for joining us today. And before I turn it over to you, our presenters, let us begin in prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, as we gather here today to discuss the vital importance of social and emotional programming in Catholic schools, we invite your presence among us. Grant us wisdom and insight as we explore ways to maximize access to federal education programs, enabling us to better serve the needs of our students. Bless our efforts, O Lord, that they may bear fruit in nurturing the hearts and minds of our youth, instilling in them the values of compassion, empathy, and faith. May our discussion be guided by your grace, leading us to solutions that promote the holistic development of every child entrusted to our care. Amen. Take it away, ladies.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Well, I think that our introductions, I think everybody knows all the good stuff about us. But I just have to say, first of all, happy birthday, Jennifer Daniels. We're so glad you were born.
Thank you.
I know many of you probably recognize Jennifer from NCEA and CLS. She's served in the capacity of working with the Secretariat at the USCCB, and she's just become a known value add to everybody who's trying to figure out funding and trying to think about untangling sort of the mystery and the knot of utilizing these funds that go with us, that go with every child that come to our schools. So I'm just super pumped for this conversation today and happy to be with you, Jen. Tell us about your new endeavor before we dive in, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, well, as she mentioned, I just launched the Faithful Citizenship Institute, which is a little bit outside of the education lane, but focused on Catholic social teaching and bringing the beauty and wisdom of Catholic social teaching to policymakers. And in my advocacy work over the years, I've just seen so many people be so passionate about various ideas, and sometimes the dialogue and the passion is a little too much. And we really are blessed in the Catholic world with our Catholic teaching to help our conversation, to guide our conversation with reason and compassion and empathy. And I hope that more of that will make more for effective policymaking here in Washington and elsewhere.
And that makes you such a good partner with Friendzy. We're so lucky to have you doing some work with us, and just your heart for kindness and compassion, and really putting, our social teaching right at the forefront of all the decisions that we make and how we navigate just life, and help our kids have the skills and the tools in their toolbox to figure those things out. It just is an awesome marriage. So I'm excited on behalf of Friendzy to be able to have this conversation with you today as we think about the need for social and emotional character development, and how we go about moving the pieces and parts around in our budgets to find the funding that's really applicable, that's right there for us to be able to tap into and to access for programs like Friendzy. So without further ado, let's look at the agenda. We are going to keep it really simple today. Jen's going to give us some really good information, and hopefully you will be able to kind of follow along with the slides. But you can certainly plan on getting the recording of this after we're done, and you'll have access to these slides. So don't feel like you have to write every single thing down. We're going to send you this along with some helpful links and things like that as part of the recording that'll come out to you a little bit later. But for our time together today, we've already done a warm welcome, and now we're going to dig into equitable services and kind of talk about that overview. We're going to take a bird's eye view of the process and kind of demystify that process just so you can see how simple it really can be, and have the breadcrumbs that you need to go navigate it. And then we're going to just talk about some next steps. So let's get started. Jennifer?
Yeah, well, this slide is our easy slide, our easy kickoff here. We just wanted to remind everybody that when we're talking about equitable services and federal programs, we're usually talking about one of two things. One is the Every Student Succeeds Act, and then second is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So even though we might talk about Stronger Connections or Title I or Title II or all these things, proportionality, it always 99% of the time goes back to one of these two programs. So let's start with ESSA first. All right, so these are our 4 programs that many of you are already very familiar with. From time to time, Congress throws us curveballs and throws us funding changes or process changes or new programs. But generally speaking, if you have a good foundation of these 4 programs, you should be able to pick up whatever is new or different each year because they come under these foundations. So Title I, of course, is the biggest program, the biggest federal part of the federal budget for education. And this is directed towards generated by funds for students that come from a disadvantaged background and are demonstrating academic need. So the programming here is usually going to focus around math and reading, but it also does provide professional development for the teachers of the students that qualify and also for their families. And then Title II is professional development. Probably one of the ones that we have the most Catholic schools participating in because it is simply a per pupil allocation. If you say you want to participate, you give your student count and you will be able to receive an allocation for services under Title II simply based on a student count. It's pretty clean and simple. And this can be used for a wide array of activities from coaching, training, workshops, and of course, attending the NCEA conference every April as well. Title III is English language learners. So children would have a language spoken other than English at home initially, and they would get evaluated for services for that. And again, does provide additional help for the teachers and the families of those students as well. And then finally is our broadest program, 21st Century Schools. This is where it kind of covers all the other stuff that is not math and reading, anything that comes from civics background, science background, computers, and then of course our Friendzy's expertise on social and emotional learning, mental health. And there's 2 programs there. There's a Part A and there's a Part B, and the Part A focuses on services to students and the Part B focuses on these community learning centers.
Absolutely. And you alluded to this, but definitely in the schools that we partner with, we certainly work with a lot of schools utilizing those Title IV funds. But we do also work with schools in providing professional development for Title II, helping, equip teachers with the tools in their toolbox that they need to eliminate those big emotions and those disruptions in learning by just really educating themselves on how to create classrooms where relationships thrive, and there's just tools that become part of the class routine that allow regulation and help kids not be distracted by those sort of emotional barriers that can get in the way of learning. And then once in a while, we work with schools with the Title I bucket to help with the parent piece. So definitely access there if you're trying to figure out ways that you can make that work. And I'll just say that I think that, Catholic schools are familiar with these title funds, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have it all figured out. So I think this is a worthy conversation. And I also wanted to mention that for Title II and Title IV, Sister Dale McDonald has some amazing webinars also that go a little bit deeper into each of those. As I mentioned, this is going to kind of be an overview and a bird's eye view. But if you look at the NCEA webinars, her webinars are amazing. And she's always just been such a steadfast resource for all of us in Catholic education. Okay, moving to the next slide. And I'm having technical difficulties. There we go. All right, you want to talk a little bit about this, Jen?
Yeah, so the second major federal education program is, of course, IDEA, and this is providing services to students with disabilities. We're going to focus more on ESEA today, but it's important to just remember, for simplicity's sake, that the process is pretty much the same for ESEA and IDEA in terms of the timeline and submitting qualifications. The important difference with IDEA is that we have the child find process, and that is an obligation of your LEA. So that's an important conversation to always have. What are they doing in their obligation to find children that are of need with disabilities, and then providing the evaluation opportunity for you so that you can determine what would be the best services available for that student and the best way to meet those needs. But in terms of the timeline and all the other stuff that we're going to go through in the cyclical process, it is very similar to ESEA.
I know that Catholic schools don't apply for federal grants, that they follow a unique process. Can you talk to us just a little bit about that process and how to navigate that?
Yes, so private schools do not apply for grants, and they do not receive direct federal funding from the federal government. So when we talk about federal programs, we often talk about receiving services as opposed to receiving money. And we never want to refer to federal programs as our money or, our grant. But we get to request services from the actual grant recipient, which is the local education agency or your local school district. They are the ones that apply for the grant. They are the ones that actually receive the funding. And then they are the ones that are obligated to sit down with you and discuss the needs of your students and your teachers and how the federal program could address your needs. And so that service is called Equitable Services, or that process is called Equitable Services. And it's really an important distinction for those that want to ensure our Catholic identity and our Catholic autonomy and, the control over our curriculum. All of those things are completely held intact, even when participating with Equitable Services, because we are not direct recipients of federal funding.
I think that's such an important point. I think that's the linchpin that we really worry about. And it's the idea that we're not the direct recipient, which allows us to maintain our autonomy. And that's so important, I know, as we think about, just what strings, I hear that all the time, what strings are attached.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so with that in mind, how does the local school district know what our Catholic schools need, what our teachers need, what those students need? Can you kind of talk to us about that process and how we let them know what our needs are?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we want to participate in these programs, we want them to be very personalized and specific to the needs of our school. And so that requires some effort, requires some conversations. But the good thing is this kind of, this is a little bit narrowed down in a 10,000-foot level, but, these 7 steps are cyclical and they happen year round over and over and over. And they're generally speaking about the same steps for each program. So once you get it down and once you understand it, it's just like another part of your school year calendar. So, here we are in the late winter, coming up on spring. And right now, we're already going to be planning for next year. So it starts very early, which sometimes throws off school leaders. They're not anticipating that, and they start getting calls from their LEA, and they're like, what do you mean? It's not even spring break. But right now, Assuming Congress passes a budget in Washington, that funding is coming out of Washington down to the states and the local school districts. So they are planning for next year. So the first thing in our process is to state you want to participate. And this is as simple as normally filling out a form. Some LEAs have one form per program. Sometimes it's one piece of paper and you check all the boxes of the various programs you want to participate in. But it's called the intent to participate, and it's just that. I intend to participate. And that's it. Will you participate? Maybe, maybe not. Can you continue to have this conversation and learn more information? Absolutely. But some LEAs are real sticklers about this. And if you don't sign the intent to participate, they're not going to count you in their allocation. They're not going to submit your information into the funding requests. And so there won't be any services available because you did not say you wanted to participate. And
All right,
again,
I'm gonna stop you right there.
early.
Are we, what I hear you saying, so newsflash, we have to look for those forms. And if we don't have those intent to participate forms, we need to call our LEA and ask for those forms, because right now is the time. And if they don't get our intent to participate form, they may not count us. And so when we call them in a couple of months and are like, hey, what's the plan? Can we have our consultation? They may not have counted you. So right now is the season to be looking for those forms. Did I
And it
understand?
also kind of puts you on the phone call list for future information. If you don't fill out the intent to participate, they're not going to invite you to the consultation potentially, or send you other reminders or updates because you didn't say you wanted to participate. So if you find yourself in the summer saying, oh, I didn't get an invitation to a consultation, well, you didn't get invited because you didn't say you wanted to participate. So again, even if you choose not to participate or choose not to go to the consultations, you want to be on that list. You want the LEAs to know who you are, and you want to have the option available. So the next thing that would come up would be submitting the data that would help to generate the funds based on your school students and teachers' needs, which would then lead to step 2 of determining that eligibility. So this will look a little different based on the program, but each program is tied to a specific need. And so the data that you submit or the information about eligibility would be tied to demonstrate that your child is eligible based on that requirement. So for Title I, this is going to look like home income data. You could use other sources of financial information from financial scholarship awards, things like that. If you have a school lunch program, you could use some of that data. Title II, again, is simply a head count. So that's all they need is a head count for that. Title III would be a home language survey. Do they speak a language other than English at home? And then Title IV is going to be more of a simple head count, again, student allocation as well. So that's going to be the first kind of introduction into, is this program, do you have students that need this program? And then if it's established that you do have the students, well, now let's get more specific. What are their needs? This is a very broad opportunity for you to submit the data that you already have in place. Again, don't worry, you're not going to have to take a state test to demonstrate data or anything like that. But the assessments you already have in place, student teacher recommendations, sometimes even parent recommendations, and you can demonstrate that need. Also, thinking about some of our socio-emotional learning data points regarding learning loss or behavior in the classroom, things like that. There is no set rules here. You can be as creative as you want and provide as much as you want in order to get your point across, to get that need across. And then along with that, you can submit suggestions or ideas on how you think you would like to achieve the goals that the students need, and how you think you could actually measure those outcomes and show that it was effective as well. And again, there's not a standard form for this across, the U.S. Department of Education comes out. So the better you can assess your own tools and data that you have in your school system, that stuff you're already familiar with, and I think you'll be the best advocate on behalf of your children, because you obviously know your children and your teachers the best. So this is your chance to give that information to the LEA. Is there anything you wanted to add there, Julie?
No, I just think that the other piece I would say is become friends with your LEA. I think that, if you know how they want you to submit that information, if you ask for their forms, then
Mhm.
you'll be able to take what you have and just package it in a way that, plays well with their system. In most places, like you said, there's no uniform. So in most places, those local education agencies have, just a quick, simple form, and you just plug in your information. But it definitely helps to use their form. Get to know them, become think of it as a partnership and behave in a way that shows them that we are willing and open to being good partners, because just keeping it about kids and serving children very well.
And I would also highlight, this is a good opportunity because there's often a lot of turnover in our LEA offices, and maybe this person you used with did Title I with last year is a new person. So they're learning your school or learning your students, and this is a good opportunity to get to know them by helping them get to know your school. And there will always be turnover. That's just something that
Yeah.
is just the way it is. And so this is kind of, oh, this is great. Let me tell you about my children since you're new here, and help you see what success we've had in the past and how we have these plans for goals for the future.
Yeah, for sure.
So once you have submitted that, the LEA, of course, is in control of the funding, right? They are the ones that are the final deciders on how the program is designed and where all that. But there is a process for this called consultation. And so we'll begin these meetings, a series of meetings, hopefully not a one-off meeting, but ongoing, timely, meaningful consultation to determine the best way to address your needs assessment. Where would the services be located? Who is interested in providing the services? Sometimes that's an outside vendor. Sometimes it's actually the LEA. And looking back at your allocation, you generated the funds based on the determined eligibility that you submitted. So what is that allocation going to actually look like, and how far is that allocation going to go to meet the needs of your students? Another good thing to discuss here might be pooling, which we need, I think, more of across, especially diocesan-wide. If you maybe would love to have a bigger allocation and you feel like you can't do as much one-on-one with a certain allocation, well, you can pool those resources together and come up with a plan that maybe we do a professional development training across the diocese or with 2 or 3 schools together to help that allocation stretch. And that all can be discussed in your consultation on those services. And then the LEA will make that final bid out to contractors. Sometimes they require RFPs. Sometimes this is a very, very lengthy process. So we don't want to start this in September of a new school year. We want to start this sooner than later. Sometimes they have to get 3 bids. Sometimes they have to the vendor has to get officially recognized in the software, the computer system, the finance people have to approve it. There can be all sorts of variables here to plan ahead for. So again, the more information you've given them in advance about the needs of your students, the more, I think, seamless that can be, because they've got a lot of things on their plate too. So let's proactively give them the ideas and the tools and the resources, and then hopefully it'll fit into their bureaucratic system that we also have to participate in.
One
And
thing
then
out there is that if you have identified vendors, like if you think social and emotional is on your list, and that, post-COVID, you're seeing students that are struggling to connect, or they're really struggling with self-management, you're going to state that in your needs assessment. But also start talking to your preferred vendor. And that gives us an opportunity. I know we do it all the time at Friendzy. We make sure that we have our ducks in a row, make sure we're already starting the process, just in anticipation that we don't want to be a barrier. We want to be sure that we're an approved vendor and we're ready to go. There are certain carve-outs that are going to require 3 bids. For some districts don't require that. And typically that would be a curriculum type purchase or something like that. That's fine, as long as you're taking good notes when you're talking to them and keeping the communication lines open with that LEA. Those pieces are really not hard to navigate. Especially like Jennifer said, this is a cycle and it's just going to continue to happen over and over. And once you kind of jump through those hoops once or twice, and then just pay attention to the changes as they come, it becomes really doable and manageable.
And one little quirk to point out is that many of you in a various dioceses have more than one LEA that you're dealing with. So don't forget, they might have their own process, their own approval. So maybe Friendzy got approved for LEA over here, and then there's a different process for another vendor to get approved over here. So again, the more proactive you can be and the more detailed you can be in your conversations, then that will make that process as smooth as possible.
Sure.
And then the last step in the process is to start the services. Ideally, the services should start, as early in the school year as possible. So that's why we're back in this whole process up so early right now, because we don't want services starting in November. We want them starting as early to September as possible. And that will be decided, hopefully, before school starts, what that's going to look like.
Absolutely. Okay, so how do we keep up with all these steps? Give us some practical tools.
Well, we mentioned this briefly earlier, but the key word here is consultation. So this is, kind of a federal jargony sounding word, but it just means have a lot of meetings. And the law itself defines consultation as requiring it to be timely and meaningful. So we like to make a joke sometimes, it's consultation, not consult-told. So you don't walk in and get told what's going to happen, but it's supposed to be a discussion. And ideally, y'all come to a consensus that is what's most important for the students and the teachers. There are certain things that the LEA has control over and kind of decisions that they can make up front in terms of how they arrange all of their federal programming for their district. So some of that is less flexible than others, but generally speaking, all the steps of the process that we just went over should be a discussion. It should not just be, here's how it's happening, here's your vendor, here's your start date, here's who's getting services. All of that should be a discussion. And so therefore, again, the more you show up prepared and ready to go and proactive with good questions and with good ideas for your own students, the more effective those consultations will be, and the better services will be designed for your students.
One of the things I'll also say here is, in my experience, consultation can have a very fluid definition as you work with different LEAs. And so one of the things I want to stress here is that it really should be consultations, plural. It should not just be one conversation where you're going to go, they're going to hand you a folder, it's going to tell you what they think that you're going to get, and you're just going to, receive information and then leave. You really want to think of this as an opportunity to paint a picture of your school, to really show up, professionally and help them see the amazing things that are happening within your school, but also to help you set that or build that relationship with them and set that foundation with them that you're there as an advocate for your children and for your school. And so you can paint the picture. If Friendzy is the tool that you need for social and emotional development, then you're going to, plead your case. You're going to explain to them why that was a good fit and how you looked at it, or say you're choosing a different curriculum or a different software program. This is your opportunity to show them the intentionality behind it and how it's rooted in the needs of your students. So you want to go in with that mindset of building and nurturing a relationship and advocating for your students in your school.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And, back to the sometimes concern that you have multiple LEAs. Again, sometimes in one diocese, you're consulting with multiple LEAs, which can become, very time consuming. This is where it's really helpful if a diocesan leader could help represent multiple schools at one consultation. help with maybe diocesan-wide planning, that maybe there's initiatives that are going on diocesan-wide that could be addressed with federal funding. And to the extent that the diocese can help take a little bit of the load off of school leaders in consultation, that's great. But also it is kind of nice to see how different LEAs do the consultation. So sometimes I would say, oh, LEA, I had this other meeting with LEAB down the road, and it was very effective and helpful. And maybe we could streamline things doing it this way. They're always looking for ways to make the process simpler. So by going to different LEAs and seeing the way they do it, even if they're just down the road from each other, sometimes it's really good to kind of share those best practices from LEA to LEA.
And two tips that I would offer, sitting, both as a director of curriculum for a diocese and in the role of superintendent, I always offered my time and found it very valuable to go along with principals as they were going into these consultations, particularly if they were straddling more than one LEA, because we were able to create a really unified plan. And they know each other. They're sitting side by side. I think of one school in particular that was in my diocese, and they had students, equal numbers of students that came from the county school system as came from the city school system. And so that's two LEAs that sit side by side, know each other really, really well. And when we came in organized and we're able to articulate that we're working with both, I think it just, the preparedness and the level of conversation and kind of, like you said, referencing the steps between the two. I think what they recognized in us was professionalism and sort of determination to do what we needed to do to dot our I's and cross our T's for our students. And they just, saw us as colleagues, and we got the job done. And so don't be intimidated by that. And there may actually be times, we did have a situation, I know in one circumstance where we just had a few schools from a separate LEA, and we went through the consultation process, and we realized for Title I, for example, it wasn't going to be a substantial enough infusion to really help programming. And so we didn't pursue it with that LEA, but we did for the other, for the larger number of students that it could impact. So you have to kind of weigh the balance there, but information is king. Showing up and staying in the game is really where it matters. And one example I would say about that, and Jennifer, I know we weren't going to talk too much about this today, but when you are in that constant communication, when new things pop up, like we had this year with a nationwide grant that came up that everybody was eligible for, then your LEA automatically thinks of you, and they're going to include you in that conversation and remember that you're there. So. All right, well, let's talk a little bit now about needs assessment and what that looks like and why that's necessary and what it involves.
Yeah, so again, the needs assessment is going to be targeted to one specific program. So you're not going to do one needs assessment for all of ESSA, but you'll need to do one for Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. And the reason is because the more specific we are on these needs assessments, the more we know that the program will benefit the students. And also it gives us an opportunity to provide very specific information about our students so that the program is tailored to meet their needs. We mentioned this briefly, but again, there's no one way to do this, and the guidance provides a whole array of opportunities or resources that you can submit. So I would suggest, an all of the above approach. Don't say, oh, what's that one piece of data that's going to put us, make our point clear. No, give 5 pieces of data that reinforces the point over and over and in different ways. Again, this can be standard academic data, but it can also be more subjective things like a teacher recommendation, family notes or family recommendation, and just kind
Teacher
of
surveys, behavior reports, attendance data, all these pieces that you already have. And if it makes sense and it connects to a need as an indicator that there's a concern, I think that's where you want to go. One cautionary tale, and I know you and I've talked about this extensively, Jennifer, is just use broad buckets. Don't paint yourself into a corner when you do the needs assessment. Don't get so granular that you can only solve one little pinpoint of a problem, because we know most of our problems have more of a wrap around need. And as you start to address them, you're going to recognize other things that need attention or shifting. So paint those broad strokes of areas that you are hoping to address.
Mm-hmm. And then don't forget, you can share the needs of your teachers and families as well. So it's not just the needs of the students. You know, thinking about something like coaching with our teachers, you know, well, we saw some lack of performance in computation. So we want to do some coaching around that area. And families as well. So again, you can be as broad as possible to cover all the bases, but provide as much data as possible. So if they want to go more into the nitty-gritty, it's there, but then those requests can cover as many buckets as possible.
And this is just an example of some data, especially if you're thinking about social and emotional and you're trying to figure out how you're going to pay for it. I like this particular piece of data because it just identifies some of the areas that might be red flags for you, to indicate that you do have a legitimate need and ways to articulate it. So if you're in a school and you're having more office referrals, or you have more students demonstrating oppositional defiance or throwing temper tantrums, those big emotions that disrupt, you know, the normal day, the normal instruction. Or if you have kids that are just disconnected, they don't care that their homework's not done, they're not engaged in conversation. It's really, really difficult for teachers to get a pulse on their, you know, how they're developing. That's a data point too, and one that we've started to see more and more post-COVID. This data is actually pre-COVID, and it was already an issue in many schools. Bullying, verbal abuse, you know, talking disrespectfully to teachers, but also to peers is important. Eloping always cracks me up. So running away from school or not being where they're supposed to be, really having to go hunt kids down and because they're not where they're supposed to be. That's a complete lack of respect and sort of discipline to the rules of the school and how we behave in a school community. Obviously, physical violence is a worry. I think verbal abuse is something that we just hear more and more. It's just talk, not just to peers, but to teachers. When we start to see these things pop up, we know that they're stripping us of our learning time. I mean, this was pre-COVID. This was 2019, I believe. And it was data collected from about 1,300 educators in different roles. And at that time, it was looking like 144 minutes of instruction every single week lost to these, you know, emotions and these behaviors. And so if you're seeing any of these things, that's an indication that you can provide anecdotal evidence, but you can also provide statistics of how many times kids are coming to the office, or where you're having these conferences, or, you know, different surveys from teachers. There's lots of different ways to collect that. And that's going to drive home the point that something significant is interrupting instruction and it needs to be addressed. These are the kinds of things that we are helping schools just kind of think about as they start to look at student outcomes and how to improve those student outcomes, maybe in a little bit more of a non-traditional way. I think it's becoming more traditional. We're recognizing social and emotional as a, you know, important area of focus in schools, but we're here certainly to help with that. Okay.
And just real quickly before we move on, that
Okay.
data, you know, keep in mind, you could submit data such as this on behalf of the diocese, and then you could have diocesan-wide data that you submit to multiple LEAs at one time. So think about how you can share data and collect data in a comprehensive way to make the most difference in your work as well.
Yeah, and you can also reference national data. You can say, we're seeing these things. We know this is a legitimate trend in education. And so for this reason, this is happening, you know, with young people in this grade band or whatever. That's fine. It just shows that you're being intentional and that, you know, there are proven ways to address this and that you want to do that seriously. Okay. Remind us a little bit about some of the sort of big takeaways and how do we find information to walk us through the process or help us as we dive in.
Yeah, well, this was a lot of information at more of a 10,000-foot level. But like we said, it is time to dive in now and get thinking about what your needs are for next year. So we do want to make sure y'all know that the U.S. Department of Education has a great website that has lots of resources for you. This is the homepage, ed.gov, and Julie is going to click on.
Yeah, and we have a little tip here. So if you type in ed.gov and then in the bar you type in ONPE, Office of Non-Public Education, that's going to take you to the right spot. We don't want you to get lost in ed.gov. You can get lost there. And I am going to take us there and hopefully not get us lost in my driving of technology.
That's how easy it is. There we go.
So here we are. And if you're going to look right here in this additional info sort of column, this is going to be a column that's going to become your friend. It's going to help you dig into each of those different types, those different pieces that we discussed today to get more specific guidance.
And I do want to point out, so what do we see? The fourth row down, you've got IDEA updated FAQs that just came out in 2022. So those are brand new. The next one says Title 8. And you say, oh, we didn't talk about Title 8 today. Well, Title 8 is a statute, is within the statute that it oversees all the previous statutes. So it is the instructional section where we have all the equitable services information. So that document governs Title 2, Title 3, and Title 4, even though it's called Title 8. So don't let that confuse you. Most of it is all the same. And then they just have a couple program-specific items towards the end. And then the next one down is Title 1. Title 1, of course, is kind of the most complicated one. You got the most steps in Title 1, and they walk you through each of those steps very, very clearly. And you'll see the dates on both of those are 2023. These are brand new documents, which you may have not seen before, but also your LEA may have not seen these before. So don't assume that they know these documents forward and backwards. So therefore, I would encourage you to print these out. These should be your equitable services go-to Bibles. And I would take them with you every time you go to any consultation. Bring them with you so that you have those resources right there at your fingertips. And above there, just also to mention the Ombudsman Corner. So the Ombudsman, this is a statutory requirement that all states have to have an ombudsman to be there to help facilitate conversations between private schools and the LEAs on equitable services. That's their job. So if you have not met your ombudsman or don't know who your ombudsman is, if you click on Ombudsman Corner, they have the entire directory there and all the contact information. Often they have their own listserv or email list, things like that. Sometimes they have state advisory boards, things like that, especially for Title I. So definitely be in touch with your ombudsman. And it's not meant to be an adversarial role. You can call the ombudsman just to say hi and just to ask a question without feeling like, I know a lot of times I hear people say, well, I don't want to call the ombudsman because my LEA is going to get mad at me. Well, if you call them and you know them and you develop a relationship with them, you don't have to feel like every call is adversarial. So it's
and
good
I can
to
say
on
I've
first
worked
name
often.
basis.
Yeah, I've worked often with our ombudsman here, and we've had changes actually. So something else to stay on top of, because you mentioned before these roles change. I always introduce myself and just say hello. Where I'm from, my diocese, and just make that acquaintance. So when I do have a question or I do need them, or if something, I don't know how to navigate something, or one LEA is telling me one thing and the other LEA is telling me something a little bit different, I can email or call my ombudsman, and they're a mediator, but also they're an expert. And so it's great to say, I don't want to, necessarily erode trust with my LEA, but I just don't understand this. And I want to be sure that I'm looking at it from all perspectives, and they'll talk it through with you, which is amazing. And then if something is really confusing, because sometimes your LEA, like Jennifer said, there may be new people or there may be new guidance that they haven't even seen. Sometimes the ombudsman is just the absolute perfect person to join that conversation and kind of get everybody on the same page with maybe the new guidance or the update. And then, of course, there are times when you just have to respectfully disagree, maybe with the process, and they can help bring that disagreement to the table so that each side can, kind of see it from their perspective, and you can come to a mutual way to move forward. Like if you're at an impasse, it doesn't have to feel uncomfortable. Again, it's all about nurturing those relationships, and also just helping in some form. I think LEAs often live very much in their public school world, and so they don't know a lot about us. They don't understand necessarily the work that we're doing. And so the more we can show them that we're informed, that we're advocating, that we're actively involved, it just helps them take us more seriously and come to the table with us as peers and professionals. And the ombudsman is a great tool and friend to help you do that for sure.
Mhm.
Okay, well, this has been a lot of great information, and I, for one, think it's super interesting. I want to talk just a little bit about next steps, because we don't want to, lose the headline here. First of all, get to know your LEAs. If you haven't talked to them in a year, give them a call, just check in, watch for that intent to participate. You can change your mind. You can check all the boxes and then decide you only want to do certain ones. That's fine. I always say yes to everything, and then, make a considered decision, but, navigate in the way that is comfortable for you. But if there's anything that we can encourage you to do, it is just to start that relationship. Friendzy is a proud partner of NCEA, and always here to help, and always here to just be a friend to schools and try to help navigate these, complex processes. And so that we came to this webinar today to hopefully help you see a pathway forward to getting the tools and resources in your school that you need. If that tool and resource, is a social and emotional character development program, we're here to help, certainly. You always have a friend at Friendzy if you need anything. Thank you so much for joining us today. Jennifer Daniels, thank you for your expertise, your constant guidance. I think you're such a trusted partner with all Catholic schools across the country, and it's definitely a privilege and an honor to be able to do this with you today.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
All right. Thank you so much. Feel free to use this contact information if you have questions, or if you need further assistance, or if I can connect you with Jennifer. Also, everything in this slide deck today will be shared. If you have registered, you can get this recording, and feel free to reach out with questions.
Thank you, ladies, so much. And thank you, everyone who attended today's webinar. NCEA continuously strives to improve the quality of our services for our members based on feedback. I just dropped the link to our survey in the chat. It should only take about 5 minutes to complete. And if you finish the survey and are interested in a certificate of attendance, please include your name and email address at the end. The certificate will be sent via automated email, so please check your spam if you do not see an email within a few minutes. And if there's any issues, please reach out to us at NCEA Marcom, MARCOMM @gmail.com if you need anything. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. God bless.